Welcome to Strength in the Numbers. My name is Andrew Codd, accountant, author, and commercial finance entrepreneur, and it's my job each week to bring you leaders in finance and business and deconstruct with them their real stories, insights, and hard-won lessons into practical advice on the key strengths and qualities you need to remain relevant in accounting and finance today, as well as the steps you can begin to take to elevate the impact you make to have a fun, successful, and rewarding career in accounting and finance. Now let's go over to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Strength in the Numbers. Now, imagine having 1,000 years worth of career advice. How would you use that to advise others, or even improve your own career outcomes? Well, our guest mentor this week is finance professional Paul Murphy, who's actually answered these questions. And not only that, he's written an Amazon #1 best-selling book that's interviewed 100 graduates, 10 years out of university, about their career paths, their hard-won lessons, and how they overcame their obstacles, and what advice they would give others in hindsight. And even better than that, a lot of these insights are relevant for finance professionals, as about 33% of those in the book that Paul interviewed have worked in finance. And Paul goes on to share some of the stories on the episode. So some other areas we cover together are one piece of critical advice that will allow you to get into more fun finance roles and how to go about it. Paul shares some practical advice on how to select a mentor for the biggest impact in your career. That this is especially crucial. And also we talk about real advice on how to approach senior managers and what really happens when you step outside your comfort zone. So look, loads of practical value in this episode, so strongly recommend you listen in. And if you'd like to follow up with Paul or get more into the detailed show notes, you can find those at sitnshow.com/podcast/072. So without further ado, over to Paul and the show.
So I started off trained as an accountant in a Big Four firm, and then I worked in various finance roles for the last 10 years or so in big multinational companies. And I've written a book. So the book is 1,000 Years of Career Advice, and it's basically me interviewing 100 graduates 10 years out of uni or college about their career paths and advice for a younger generation. So 33% of them roughly are finance. So either banking or accounting, commerce and industry, compliance, entrepreneurs. So I think a lot of it's very relevant to maybe your listeners.
So maybe let's start with your career journey then. Maybe what was sort of one moment that stood out to you the most on your career journey?
Sure.
That that you feel like you benefited most from?
So I guess the role I'm currently in, and I'm the finance lead on the integration of two big massive pharma companies to make the biggest healthcare or consumer healthcare company in the world. If you can imagine, those two companies would have operations in 90 odd countries all over the world, and you'd have to merge those operations. So two warehouses become one warehouse, two offices become one office. You'd have to rehost IT networks, have a new distribution network, close down manufacturing operations, move products. And that was this role is very much problem solving, Andrew. So instead of your kind of nuts and bolts finance role, it's me sitting in a room with very senior people and figuring out how we do some of this stuff, how we overcome a customs issue in Kazakhstan or a warehouse problem in Brazil. So it's like really, really interesting and kind of the way I've wanted my career to go. And maybe that kind of segues into why I wrote the book. So I'm not sure about yourself or some of your listeners, but I wasn't a huge fan of finance. So my parents kind of said, my dad's an accountant, my parents said, oh, become an accountant, you can be whatever you want to be once you qualify. And I think that's a little white lie, because you're just a qualified accountant when you go to recruitment. So I kind of tried to get more commercial with every role and be more working in the business and leave the finance stuff behind. And when I look back to my career, I kind of noticed that what I'm doing now, or what I've done in my last 3 or 4 roles, is nothing like what I did in my undergrad or my leaving cert.
Interesting.
Or I did a master's in accounting. It's just very different. And then I wondered, was that the same with all of my peer group? And I knew a lot of friends who weren't that happy in their careers or had fallen into it. They're in their early 30s or late 20s. And then that got me thinking. So what I did is I decided to interview 100 of them across 16 different professions, all roughly 10 years out of university. And it's really interesting read, even for me, just having those chats, all the people, where they made their successes, where they might have messed up, and what they'd advise a younger person to do to avoid messing up like they did. So that's really the book in a nutshell. I don't know, what did you think yourself when you had a little peek?
Okay, it's probably because you've got a background in finance, Paul, but there's a lot in there for finance professionals. But I also like the fact that there's other professions in there as well, so we can get sort of similar ideas, see if there's any commonalities or anything that's slightly adjacent to what we do that we can learn from as well. And for me, again, similar to having guests like yourself, Paul, on the show, it's about maybe we might have some big decisions to make in our careers, and there might be an element of fear attached with those. But doesn't it help us if we've seen other people have gone through similar challenges and how they overcame them? And particularly, I love the bits where people share on this show, like in your book, they're sort of the hardest won lessons, so that we don't necessarily have to suffer all the pain. A little bit of pain in our careers is good because it then forces us to ask some tough questions of ourselves. And I love the expression, like, nothing ever grows in a comfort zone. But I had very similar frustrations, like what I learned at college. From an accounting perspective, how useful are accounting qualifications nowadays? I mean, when you look at things like business partnering or digital disruption, how much of the syllabus did we cover at university or even in our accounting qualifications that we're going to be using practically day to day? Some initial thoughts is, yeah. So they are looking at it and doing something about it, because I want to make sure that the qualifications that are being put out going forward are actually including some practical advice that we can use day to day. And again, that's why I liked your book, because I think the readers will find something in there that they can start implementing that day or tomorrow, so that they can get more out of their careers. And ultimately, again, the aim of the show is to help create accountants who are influential worldwide in their organizations, but also solving meaningful problems for them as well. So so that way we can have those fun careers that I think we'd all really like. And in terms of your book, I think that came out a lot, is people in the finance careers did figure out ways of turning them into being fun and enjoyable and rewarding, and I guess that's what we all want, right?
So absolutely. And maybe what might be useful for your listeners is if I just talk you guys through how I went more commercial and I maybe broke out of your financial control-esque role. So basically, I left Big Four and wasn't a huge fan of audit, but it was great training in retrospect. Went into a media company in a financial control role and wasn't a huge fan of it, wanted to go more commercial. And to do this, I'd always be on the lookout for new roles, like always, all year round, not only internally, but lots of different companies in different industries. I'd just always be on the lookout, because getting the sexier, inverted commas, commercial roles is tough. So I always, in the last 3-4 roles since coming out of that Big Four, I always stepped out of my comfort zone. I always found the best roles weren't necessarily a promotion in the company that I was in already. So that was a big thing for me. I think if you mentioned stepping out of your comfort zone, if you go to a different company, you learn so much more, and the status quo won't be the same, the politics might be the same, etc., etc. So and I might mention a friend of mine in the book later on. I've learned a huge amount, and my CV is way better for jumping around a little bit. And I think that's a thing you can do in your 20s, maybe not so much in your 30s. It's maybe like, well, what is this guy at? But in your 20s, a big theme of the book is try different things out. Don't settle for doing a cushy role for more than you should. Try and vary your skills and try and get different experiences so you can figure out which you like. And then the stuff you most enjoy, if you really enjoy what you do, everything else will come easier. Everything else will just fall into place. So just to continue on that one, or just to finish that one off, went to financial control role, then went to a financial planning analysis role, but it was very commercial. It was me business partnering with like 50-year-old directors and looking at commercial contracts, looking at how we drive down cost per trains, utilization rates in a warehouse. So it was very, very commercial. And then I went and did big projects. So I did a £1 billion rollout of an ERP system where I was basically looking at cost saving initiatives. So how could we outsource pieces of work? How could we charge our contractor, pay our contractors less? How could we not do pieces of work? How could we, simple things like how could we make pieces of the deployment overlap? So how much could we save out of that £1 billion for a rainy day? And then my current role is that big integration. And that again was unlocking huge benefits from synergies and putting your heads together with the senior ops guys and saying, okay, well, is this the best use of this money for the company? If it was your money, would we be doing this for the company?
That's a great question.
So it was kind of stepping out of my comfort zone, doing lots of different roles, lots of different industries. And with that, I found I really liked the commercial stuff. I really liked being in the trenches with the business. And I think for your listeners, once you kind of do some of that trial and error and figure out what you like, you might like financial control. But once you kind of figure out what you like, then I'd advise trying to find a person 5 or 10 years older than you.
Yeah.
With the role that you might like, whether it's CEO, COO, or just an FD maybe, and saying, okay, this guy is such and such experience, such and such skills. Do I have those skills? If not, how do I pick those up? What do I need to get there so that I can be at the interview table looking for a job like theirs? So LinkedIn, we didn't have LinkedIn 15, 20 years ago. Now you can type in head of commercial finance, CFO. A lot of guys have all their CVs on there. So I would really encourage anyone, and not just like a young person or a person in their 30s. If you want to be an executive director, go find those people, have coffees with them. So yeah, that's how I would say get into the more fun roles, as you say.
Yeah, actually, Paul, you just reminded me something on my own career journey. I was really bad at asking for advice and help early on, and that's one thing I wish I'd changed. I wish the moment I was out university looking for those people, maybe if we didn't have LinkedIn, maybe I'd be too kind if I said that, but that's really great advice, breaking it down in terms of how to get the most out of your career. And in finance, there's loads of different types of role. There's compliance, there's controllership, there's FP&A, there's commercial finance, then there's the leadership levels as well. And there's also people in finance branching out into areas like customer success also, because of our ability to see end to end across the business and look to unlock value within the business. So we get really good skill sets coming out of university from a technical perspective or from our counter qualifications. To make the most of them, I think we just need to go and have conversations with people in the roles we feel that we'd like to do. And you also made an important comment there. It's trial and error. I don't think we'll make that level of success or that fun or that enjoyment without a bit of error. So I suppose what was probably the worst thing or in your mind, or did anything really bad happen for you when you stepped outside your comfort zone?
No. And so I interviewed all of those guys I interviewed in my book. And a lot of the entrepreneurs who are very successful, I interviewed like 9 entrepreneurs. A lot of those guys stepped out of the comfort zone. And did any of them regret it? Not a single iota. And I think if you ever asked anyone the same question, I think it'd be a really, really slim minority of people go, oh no, I should have stayed where I was. But it's just making that initial step,
I suppose in terms of the book, what was sort of the biggest learning for you after doing the book in terms of yourself or maybe from the people that you were interviewing?
I suppose myself, I found I got a huge buzz out of it. So writing it, getting it published, 1,200 odd copies were downloaded in the first 5 days, and going on a couple of podcasts like this, getting good feedback on my blog saying, wow, you really helped me with such and such an interview. All of that, I'm sure you do as well. I got a great buzz out of it. And in finance, I never really got that buzz. Working with the project team is good and it's fun. But, I was like, oh, well, maybe I should have done something more creative. So that's what I kind of my big learning for myself. And then I guess in terms of learning for people reading it, there's just so much pieces of advice offered, so many pieces of advice. So everybody was so willing to help because, as you say, they really learned the hard way, or they had a couple of years as a bad role, and they wanted people to kind of get the learnings from that. So they'd offer three, four, five pieces of advice, and they say, if you were me, if you were in my shoes, I would have done this, or etc. etc. So I had like three, four, 500 pieces of advice. I'm trying to condense them at the back. I have about 11 pages of the most recurring kind of themes. And I'm pretty sure if people read them, they'd be like nodding their heads, going, "Oh yeah, I did that," or "Yeah." And it's just, I think it's just human nature that you do these things, and you only in hindsight you might maybe realize maybe what you should have done. So that's the whole point of the book. It's 10 years of people's hindsight and trying to help people in their 20s, late 20s, and even, there's tremendous life advice in there. So even people who are a bit older, it's like, it's really valuable stuff, I think.
So thanks.
Maybe I could just touch on some of the good finance interviews that I can think of.
Yeah, if you could, yeah. What's the ones that stand out in your mind?
A lot of them kind of are linked to what we've been talking about. So one of them is a guy called Kevin. So Kevin basically worked his way up from a grad program to be a manager in a corporate finance division of a big company in Dublin. And so then he went off and worked as a right-hand man to a billionaire investor.
Oh, wow.
And so now he's in his 30s. He set up his own very successful consultancy. And in the book, he talks about the importance of having good personality. So I think in finance, people sometimes are inclined to stay at their desk, churning out numbers. They're very busy with month-end deadlines or forecast deadlines, and they don't really place much importance on building relationships and growing their networks. So I don't know about you, but I've worked with loads of people in finance that do great jobs, but nobody really knows about them outside their little, area. And Kevin is a big believer in the more people you know, the better jobs you're going to get. It's a numbers game. Like the majority of his clients in that consultancy now, he's flying. He built those relationships up in the last 5-10 years, and it opened so many doors. So I think you were talking about you didn't reach out to people, or you didn't want to reach out to people, and I don't think it comes naturally to people in the UK and Ireland. But now I think that's one of the big things in the book. Everyone said, "Oh, I would have reached out to more people." I now understand the importance of networking. Very often, you don't interview for a great job. If you have a network, you just get it. So that was Kevin sprung to mind.
Yeah, actually, I love that story. I love all stories like that, Paul, and it's great to hear a fellow finance professional has actually been able to do that. That should give us all encouragement, and maybe we set the challenge for our listeners today to think about the year ahead and challenge themselves each week. Talk to someone new, get out from behind their desk, or even if they want to stay behind their desk and jump on a phone call because that's safer for them to do. Because what's the worst thing that happen? Oh, you might actually learn something from someone, or develop a connection, or maybe share what you're about. So other people are out there looking for ways to help you, or if something comes to mind for them. So that's really encouraging for us.
Paul, people are always dying to talk about themselves, always.
And that's the great thing about finding mentors. You just leave them talk, and you learn so much. There was a guy yesterday I met in Cork. I actually had to go buy some shirts, and he was the owner of the place, and he was telling me about how a great story, how he was on the sleeping rough on the streets of East London in a sleeping bag, and now he's running a very successful suits and shirts business.
Wow!
And hearing that story, I was like, that was really interesting. And then he's asking me at the end, "Oh, how could I help you?" I mean, in terms of your work. And I said, I explained about the show, and he said, yeah, I've got to mention that to people. That's really great what you're trying to do. So you're going to probably benefit in some way out of it, just by having those conversations. So Paul, that was really good. I suppose in terms of yourself, you've probably received so many great bits of advice now, speaking to so many mentors and about their careers, whatever. Like, what is the sort of best bit or bits of advice you've heard or along your career that you can share with our audience?
Maybe, I don't know about your listeners, but I haven't got a huge amount of good career advice. You I don't know about you, Andrew, but like some managing is a real skill and coaching is even beyond that. So, in my experience, I had one very, very good one, and I'm still in touch with him now. Very inspiring dude early on in my career. But in my career, I haven't had a huge amount of advice. Maybe that's why I went seeking out all these people, asking them. Maybe it's kind of interconnected. I don't know. But the hindsight thing, I think it's just so valuable. You know, if you can reach out to people who are 5, 10 years ahead of you, I wouldn't encourage people reaching out to people who are 20 or 25 years ahead. Like if you are a 20-year-old and you reach out to a guy in his 50s who is the CEO, he might give you the best advice because the world's moved on, you know, since he was 25. But if you can get that guy or that lady at the next step up the ladder and say, okay, how would you advise me to go about my next 3 to 5 years? I think that's really, really, I think that's the best advice I could offer anyone.
They're definitely like if people when they're seeking a career journey have an idea in mind of what they want the ideal position to be like, and then that will give you an indication of who you need to be speaking to, as you've been sort of sharing, Paul, you know, and they will help fill in the gaps about the next 3 to 5 years or whatever time frame you're looking for, and they'll even help you understand if it's possible, or they may even be able to help you on your journey. You know, I've heard of stories when people have started asking questions like that of others and mentors, they've ended up in roles that have accelerated their careers in ways that they wouldn't have imagined if they just kept sitting behind their desk. You know,
Totally.
So I'd say it's great bit of advice. And I suppose in terms of, you know, looking back on your own career in hindsight, Paul, you know, what's been sort of the standout moment for you?
It would be that big integration role because I'm kind of firmly in the business now. So I'd sit in the project room with 20 very senior guys, and they would come ask me business questions, you know, all day, every day. So the experience you get out of that, instead of being in a stuffy finance department, it's just great and kind of whetted my appetite for more commercial stuff. So it's very much like whatever you can to get those experiences to make those informed decisions to go, I do really like this. How about I reach out to this person? A bit like you, and maybe you've interviewed so many people, you're like, that guy's got a really cool job, you know? It's only through these discussions you can get these. And another friend of mine in the book, he's about my age, but he is the CFO now of a really well-known sporting organization. And that guy, just to tell your listeners, he's not any more smarter than anyone else. Like he worked in a big four in New Zealand and did some roles with an airline company, cool media companies in London. But he was always looking for opportunities and always kind of trying to make those contacts. And he said in the book that don't be intimidated by people more senior than you. If there's a problem, very often the people who are more senior than you in the room, they don't know the solution. They're just better at bluffing.
Well said. Yeah.
So there's a lot of nuggets like that in the book. That there's a lot of smart people who've done very well for their stages in life, and they think outside the box a little. So there's a lot of nuggets in the book. So I'd really recommend it.
Yeah, and that's another thing I like about it. All those nuggets have been collected in a book. I feel like I've heard similar thoughts on the podcast and the interviews, right? And it's great, but you'd have to listen to all the podcasts to do that, right? There's a lot there, but what you've done is you've managed to put it into a book so people could read it at their leisure, you know?
Yeah.
And it's always there. It could be like one of the go-to reference guides, you know, that I wish something I had when I'd left university. That would have really helped. So and I even think people who are more into their career thinking of the next steps as well. So no, highly recommend it, Paul. And I suppose in terms of the next 12 months for you, you know, building on what you've achieved so far, what does the next 12 months look like for you?
I don't know if I'm going to write another book. It was
yeah, well, I mean, the more people you meet on your journey, it could go from 1,000 years to to 2,000 to 3,000. You never know, right?
Well, we're going to definitely do a 10-year kind of see where they are, and who knows, maybe a 20 years see where they are, because
Very
you'll have probably a whole load of hindsight about, oh, shouldn't have had that baby, shouldn't have done that marriage.
well, you heard it here first. Sounds like it could be a very useful project as well. And there's more life experiences that I suppose people pick up as well outside of the career
Yeah,
that on the
totally.
journey. So no, that's great. And in terms of our audience, Paul, if they wish to connect with you, where's the best place to find you at?
Best place would be my blog, A Thousand Years of Career Advice .com. And actually, Andrew, I think if you guys, any listeners, can email me at the blog with free book in the title of the email, for the first 5 listeners, I'll post them a free book, because I really think it is something that people need to read, because people, either if they're students or in Leaving Cert or A levels or university or graduates or end of your 20s, you've kind of stopped partying and having a good time, and then it's kind of like, oh, this is my 30s, I'm not sure I want to do this for the rest of my life. And even parents and lecturers, I think there's a lot in it for loads of different people. So anyone to email me at the contact details on my blog, free book in the title email, first 5 get a free book.
That's fantastic, Paul. That's amazing. And again, I encourage everyone to check that out, and I'll put all the relevant links in the show notes. So, Paul, as we look to wrap up, any sort of closing messages, remarks, or thoughts for our audience?
I guess just for the finance community, I think just don't be afraid to try and put yourself out there and get outside finance. I think in my experience, all the operation people I've dealt with, they always look down on finance as, oh, I've got to do the budget with that guy, but I shouldn't really see him for the rest of the year. So try and put yourself out there. You'll enjoy it more. You'll make better relationships, and you'll just develop a lot more. And I think if more finance people could do that, I think it just would make their lives a lot better, I think.
Great thoughts, great advice to end on there, Paul. So look, Paul, you've been a great guest. Thanks for investing your time with us today. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing essentially 1,000 years worth of career advice, plus with all the great steps we can take in finance to find a more fun, rewarding and successful career for ourselves in finance. So Paul, thanks for coming on the show.
Perfect. And just to end, Andrew, what's the best career advice you've ever got, do you reckon?
Best career advice I ever got? Great question. And yeah,
Sorry,
the interview becomes the interview. So look, I would say I was 25. I just made a bad career move to an organization which I thought would be much more ethical than it was. I was working 60 to 70 hours a week, and I felt I wasn't getting any support from those around me. So I started applying to loads of jobs, and there was an Irishman over in London who worked in recruitment, saw that I was applying to loads of his jobs, and he said, Andrew, I've nothing for you, but I think I know what you're going through, and I'd love to meet you for a coffee because I think I can help. So we met in a hotel off the M40 as it was, Junction 4, I think it was a Holiday Inn, in the lobby there. He bought me a coffee and he gave me this idea called a career bone diagram. And he said, well, Andrew, you have no idea what you want out of your career, obviously. And I said, I was about to challenge him. I said, no, he seems to know what he's talking about, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut and listen to what he has to say. And he gave me this diagram which said, look, first step is you need to know what you want in 3 years' time and write that. And then he said the next bit was, okay, write down all the strengths and resources you have at your disposal now and sort of like what qualifications you have. So I had a degree, I was a chartered accountant and so on. And then the bits in between, start filling those in, but keep focusing on the end goal and talking with people so that they can help you get from where you are to where you want to be. And like some of the things I wanted was to go get an MBA, have a managerial role, have a 6-figure salary, and the freedom of running my own business. And lo and behold, bang on 3 years' time, I had all of those things. I had a brilliant role. I ran my own business. I was consulting with a lot of organizations, receiving fantastic mentorship along the way. Then it all started from that one bit of career advice. And I've taken that diagram and I've shared it with tens of other people who have actually found it work similarly for them.
Wow.
And again, I have to attribute that one intervention from this mentor who probably is responsible for the show ultimately, because it was my way of giving back and continually giving back from a mentoring perspective and trying to make time for people. And in terms of that giving back, it was getting so much, so difficult to keep meeting people one-on-one all the time. I said, let's just do the podcast. And in terms of doing that allows me to scale my time a bit better, but also share other perspectives, because I don't know all the answers. But and as much as I had very much hard-won lessons as well, and I'd hate to think that we've people in finance struggling with 60, 70 hours a week, hating their job,
Loads of people
taking it out on their families, nearest and dearest, which is not constructive at all. It doesn't need to be that way. But if you are in that position, there are people out there who can help. And again, likewise, if people are like that, just connect with me. All the links are on the show, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. And Andrew at SITNshow.com, and I can help people walk through that diagram that turned my career around.
Good man, very inspiring.
Well, hey, great question, but I didn't quite expect it. So, Paul, thanks for asking the question, and thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, good man.
So there you have it. Hope you enjoyed today's show. If you'd like to know more about our guests today, their bio, and follow up on the resources mentioned during the show, you can find all the relevant links and more at sitnshow.com. There you'll also be able to get access to earlier shows, read the latest blogs. There's also an opportunity to subscribe to our newsletter, which will give you heads up as to when the next show is coming out, latest events, news, and anything that's going to be relevant to help you have a fun, rewarding and successful career in finance and accounting. And just before you go, we really appreciate your feedback. If there's something we can do better on the show, something that's not working, or something you'd like to see, even a guest you'd like for us to invite onto the show, someone who you think might be able to benefit you more and also the rest of our community, please let me know. You can email me. I'm at andrew@sitnshow.com, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just drop me a message so I know how you found me and we can connect. And really, it's our community that'll make the show. If we keep engaging and driving each other on, we'll keep on building our strength in the numbers. When all is said and done, if we can do the numbers better and finance better, we'll create more opportunities for ourselves, our friends, our families, our communities and our businesses. So until next time, have a good rest of the week, take care, and let's keep building our strength in the numbers.